right, 6:40, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Looking to work the agenda. Yes.
I'm not gonna stand up because I'm soaking wet. My feet,
Okay.
my legs. I would move to. I would move to amend the agenda.
Okay.
And tonight to include a discussion of separating or ending the joint wards 2 and 3 NPA.
Who wants a second? We have a second. Second.
Thank you. And a third.
And third.
I would also suggest we do it at 7:45 tonight, just before the.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to amend the agenda to include a discussion and presumably vote on solving joint operations
Dissolving
with Ward 2.
the joint.
Is there any
NPA.
discussion on that? Comments?
We're just here basically. Safety.
So, seeing no discussion, do a voice vote. All in favor?
So the bylaws say that you can do this all at one time, to have a motion to do something, you don't have to do it at the next meeting?
No,
And
that's to be
warn the
warned
vote.
on the agenda. That's to be on the agenda for a vote.
Okay, and it's on the agenda.
It's on the
Okay,
agenda now.
just checking.
So,
Anybody else?
all in favor?
In favor?
Anybody opposed? Okay, we have an amended agenda here. Is there anybody on the line?
No.
So now that we've amended the agenda, I'll do introduction to steering committee. I'm Chris Aisley. I live on College Street. I've been doing the NPA for a few years now.
I had previously been on the NPA back in the early 2000s, so it's my second tour doing it. Michelle Borbis over here. All right.
You turn your speakers off.
I turned the speakers off and I turned off the microphone.
No house speakers, so you're just gonna have to speak up for the audience.
All right. So I'm Chris. I'm on the steering committee. That's Michelle. She's on the steering committee. Charlie there in the red is also Charlie Messing's on the steering committee as well. Then Amy Pranowitz is on the steering committee. She's coming late from another meeting. So I guess at this point, we can just go around the room and just state your name, street, Lavon, and any other thing. Perfect.
Okay, so going forward, we need to pick up that mic.
Mainly for these people, for the recording purposes.
Okay. Okay.
Leah Murphy, I live on Buell Street.
Bob Kiernan, I live in Ward 3, downtown Burlington, on Church Street.
Charlie Messing, Ward 3, Pine and College in the BHA building.
Gail Welch, Mackenzie House on Elmwood Avenue, Burlington.
Trudy Richmond, Mackenzie House.
Laura Solomon, I live on Church Street in Ward 3.
Sharon McCarthy, I live on Pearl Street.
Dennis McCarthy, I live on Pearl Street.
My name's Sal Millichamp. I'm in Ward 7. I was at the vigil and Charlie, who works here, came and told us there's a meeting here you probably will want to come to at 6:30. So here we are. Maybe we'll learn something. They said the police chief was going to be here and, to come and so anyway, we're from Ward 7. Here we are.
All the way up there.
Yeah. I'm Bernie Carver. I live in Ward 7 also, so we're here as observers and looking forward to the meeting.
Bill Jones, I live, where do I live? Mackenzie House, Elmwood Avenue, thank you.
Have anything on their mind that they want to share moving into public forum? Everything gets up to 2 minutes, we got 10 minutes for public forum, Chief's not here.
Well, Charlie, yes, I would say that if there's anything we can do to urge the city to commence fixing all the sidewalks downtown, it would do a great deal to help the older people in the community who now consist of.
Andrea.
Well, that's because this is a microphone and I don't want to yell in it.
Whatever.
I'll just face you. So
Good idea.
that's them using a microphone. You're saying it's unidirectional? It picks it up just as well here?
No, for everyone's understanding, the microphones are so people who are watching, for the recording purposes of the camera and the computers, that's what the microphones are for. The microphones are not connected to any speakers in the room to
Right.
amplify your voice. So if you do yell into them, our technology is going to hear it for the recording purposes.
You know, Ward 7, I use that general term. You don't have to
No.
just observe.
Speakers
You
are-
can speak at that meeting as well.
I'm not sure what you're telling me to do, but this okay?
Just, I was,
Something that.
Bring that to my face. Okay,
Like, so, yeah, pretend you're on stage.
well, this has been very soothing. The idea is that it is very difficult for older people to get around. And there's quite a divide between the generations all over the city. And I'd like to do something to bring them together. Have older people and younger people able to communicate. For the media decrees, they shall not. And I believe that they are wrong. It will do us all good to become, as we once were, a real community in real life.
Hi, my name's Trudy, Richmond. I live at Mackenzie House. I want to talk about the pod community, which I've been talking about for 2.5 years now. Initially, I had really suggested that the residents in pod community be folks that are attempting to maintain their sobriety, and that this to be a community that would allow people and support people that are trying to get sober and stay sober. The way the way it runs now is scheduled to be over in June of 2025. This is a low barrier community as it is right now. And what I'm really, really advocating for a year in advance is for them to change the criteria to make it a residential, or not necessarily residential, but a supportive community for those folks who are trying to attain sobriety and maintain sobriety. So far, Burlington has spent over $2 million. Well, not $2 million yet, but when they put in the safe injection site, they will have spent over $2 million for the community that is actively addicted. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying that we need to be as supportive for the folks that are trying desperately to get sober and stay that way. They cannot be housed among a population that is actively addicted. This is setting them up for failure. So I'm starting now and have been talking about this for about the last 6 months. And I will continue to probably say this at every meeting. So there you go. Thanks for your time. Bye.
In case they want to talk with, this is just for the video.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to share?
Just quickly, in line what you just said, they just got their funding renewed for that second year, didn't they?
program. And it's to be over in June, I think it's either 21st or 24th, 2025, as it stands.
Yeah, but the funding that they have and have had was only 1 year's funding. It had to be renewed, and I believe it was just recently renewed. It may have been in a recent city
Is that
council
for the
meeting.
maintenance of it? That's just for the
So
state.
they had a 1 year, now they have funding for the second year.
Okay, well, they're in their third, they're starting their third year.
But
so-
you're advocating for the third year.
No, I'm
Oh,
advocating.
wait, I'm sorry, I'm missing out. I'm thinking it was only here for 1 year.
No,
So,
it's been here 2 years
so they just got funding
for an additional
next
year.
because I think it goes on a fiscal year.
Okay, okay. Well, so like I say, it's like in June of 2024, or 25, the pilot program is over as it now stands, as it now exists. And I really would like it to be changed. And the folks that are living there are welcome to stay as long as they try to get sober.
As I recall, when,
That's a long story. It was supposed to be, we're supposed to transition them out to housing, which never happened. And so they've been there for like ever, unless they get kicked out because of their behavior. They're just there.
yeah.
No, there's no requirement at all. They don't have to do anything except just be there.
I'll jump in on this one here. I have heard from the folks on the street outreach team that there are a number of folks who are ready to transition into permanent housing, but they cannot find any permanent housing that is affordable with the vouchers that they have. And that's part of the larger picture here with the housing and affordability crisis that we're facing here in the city and throughout the state.
I was just wondering if anybody's talked to Housing First, and those are the qualifications for people, are there? My name is Amy, and I am also on the steering committee with Chris and Charlie. And I guess that's it. And I was wondering, I know there's a program that runs under Pathways that's called Housing First, and they help people who are transitioning out of various places where they've been stuck. It could be prison, it could be in some institution. And they get housing and they get wraparound services, so they get back into housing and they get the help they need to get to places they need to go and to just settle into being in a real home. And I was just wondering if anybody knew what the qualifications are that people have to be able to get into that housing, because it's the kind of thing that might work with the people on it, possibly, I don't know, with the people in the pods. And we could look into that. Am I talking loud enough, Charlie?
Good enough for me. I don't know about that.
We heard you.
I'll just use my outside voice. I think you can probably all hear me in the background.
Yeah.
I have an outside voice too, which, and I can use it in the microphone, be even louder.
There we go. Anybody else have anything they want to share here for the public forum, or we'll be moving in?
I was just going to ask you, yeah, I think you already answered the question. Has one or two or three people transitioned out of the pod housing? Because that was a very big platform that was offered when that whole thing was being proposed. That the concept, of course, was to move people to housing. And I've often wondered, because of all the activity around the pods, and they're doing a good job, but it just didn't seem to me, I mean, I don't have a list of any of the people there or know anyone, but it didn't seem to me like any of those kind of services were being, I'm sure they're being offered, but they're not being acted upon.
To my knowledge, one person, there was a newspaper article a while back that said one person successfully transitioned out. I think COVID and all that sort of slowed everything down. But at the very onset of this, I was not sure how they were going to take the people that they were describing as people that were placed or living there because they could be nowhere else. They couldn't function in any of these other type of shelters or motel programs. That's why they were there. Also, I mean, they weren't required to do anything about treatment or getting healthy or whatever. I don't know how they were figuring they can then transition into housing. I don't know who would rent to them if they can't function in a shelter, if they're so disturbed or whatever their problem is that they can't function. I never was real clear on that. And they never were real clear about that either. They just wanted it done.
Yeah, and you're close to it. I mean, I'm a little bit further away from it. I live across from City Hall,
Yeah.
but the communication is not that great about what's happening there and what's improving or not improving. So we
I
don't
think
know
they're doing
much
a
about
great
it.
job. I think Mike Monty and his crew is doing a great job with what they have, maintaining what they have. But the plan to transition the folks was, it was a good idea without a whole lot of thought or planning on exactly how that was going to happen. Pardon me?
Feed the people there.
Correct. Yeah, they do have like community health comes in there and provides, medical services. They have a van that comes in. They do provide them with counseling services. They certainly can go, they will facilitate them going into rehab should they want to. I don't know. I've not really heard that that's happening a lot.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not over there every day, no one, but this is just what's being reported back.
We hand out food and clothing every Sunday here at, right in front of this building at 8 o'clock in the morning. So we talked to some of the people there. We'll bring, if we have leftover food, we'll take it over there. And what we have heard is, that idea of it being transitional, but people who have been unhoused, once they got someplace, they were pretty happy that they had someplace. And some people have said, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to have something where I can close the door and feel safe. Because the other people who come to get food often talk about their belongings have been stolen. Since we gave out clothing too, do you have any clothes? My clothes have been stolen. So to think of someone moving someplace and then they can feel safe, I can have a little bit of understanding that they're not going to move right away. And I understand that it was supposed to be transitional, but
Well,
I think talking to Champlain Housing Trust, you would get more information than us trying to figure it out.
Thing of it is, I mean, they can stay there and do basically whatever they want to do, as long as they're not, going, beating each other up or whatever. I mean, so they can continue to use drugs and do whatever lifestyle they choose and it costs them nothing and they just sort of live there. I mean, who wouldn't want to stay there?
Give a brief history and purpose of the NPAs for the student housing here. If Chief Duran has not arrived by the time we're done with that, we will just roll into that discussion about the distribution. Back about public safety.
We'll be moving into the NPA history and purpose now. If the chief is not here by the time I'm done with that, we will roll into the next item on the agenda and then circle back to get the public safety update when the chief arrives. So the NPAs were founded in 1982 under the Bernie Sanders administration. The intention behind the neighborhood planning assemblies was to provide a greater level of interaction between the city's decision makers, namely the city council and the commissions, and the residents of the city who had opinions on various things. So specifically, the NPA was intended to get my notes here. There was a number of things that they were trying to do, which was to facilitate open, accessible meetings for city residents through each of the wards. The time there were 7. We would like to provide residents with information concerning city programs and activities, to determine the perspective of city residents with respect to the city's needs, to provide residents with an opportunity to make recommendations relating to government decisions, and also to provide advice to city commissions and the city council relating to community development, housing programs, the city's comprehensive development plan, waterfront planning activities, and the city budget. So the city does provide us, each ward with a small budget of $2,500 a year to be used for those purposes that I just outlined, namely to outreach to residents to get them involved and bring more voices into the political process, so that ordinary people have a voice in the decisions that are being made here in City Hall. Most of the NPAs meet monthly, kind of a designated time, and that's what we do, is we talk about things. So anybody have any questions? Liam? On occasion. All right. So unless there's any further questions, without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to Chief Murad here in a moment, and we'll get underway. He'll give us a brief presentation about the situation here in downtown, and then we will move into Q&A. So Chief Murad. And the chief does have a presentation that we will be making available afterwards. So I'll just give a quick verbal and take some questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm glad so many people came out on this, very, very rainy night. It was the first responder night up at Centennial for the lake monsters, and I think they might have gotten rained out because we heard a little bit. I had sent some officers up there in our ERV, or at least intended to, but I don't know how the weather turned out. So thank you for being here on such a rainy night. There is a presentation that I've had. I gave it to the Police Commission last Tuesday. I present to the Police Commission on the last Tuesday of every month, and usually produce a very large chief's report that includes a lot of data and a lot of stories. And this one had a lot of information about staffing, about overall call volume, and also about a lot of stuff for D area, what we call D area, or the downtown, and specific crime trends, specifically around public order crime trends in the downtown. And then it talked a lot about what we're trying to do to get out of the hole that we're in with regard to staffing and the efforts that we're making there. So I would encourage anybody to take a look at that who wants to. I did not, there's nobody's going to be able to see it on that screen, and I can't print out. It's like 30 pages long, so I couldn't make printouts for everybody, but it is on our webpage. And I encourage anybody to see it. If you have a hard time finding it, I'm happy to email you the link directly, and help you find it that way. But I think that since I've seen many of you before, going through all that actually would be somewhat redundant for a lot of you. And instead, I think what Chris suggested is that we just make it a Q&A, and I'll take any kinds of questions that you have, with the preface that I know that we are in a tough position around this part of town particularly, but throughout the city. And it's a challenging spot. And I have these conversations daily with my executive team and with officers in the department. And the degree to which we feel like we are just swimming upstream or pushing against the ocean, or take your pick of metaphors for a situation that's challenging and has been for several years now. But that said, I absolutely want to know how people are feeling about the things that we are experiencing. And we absolutely need to get the data from people calling us and telling us about the conditions that they're experiencing. Otherwise, we can't address the parts that we can address, even though we're simply not going to be able to address all of it. Anyway, so anybody have anything? Yes, sir.
My name is, I live on the corner of Mule and Orchard Terrace.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of issues, but the question I have is, why has the city decided to allow homeless encampment on the lower block of Beulah Street? If you go there right now,
yeah,
there are 5 tents, there are mattresses, there are
at night at least 20 people sleeping there. Every morning between 7 and 8. I see the dealer cars drive up and start providing the morning fixes. And I see that again in the afternoon. And I don't understand. I appreciate that the police department has done 2 arrests there in the last week, and that was helpful. But unfortunately, the drug distribution is rampant there. And the city seems to have ceded that street. People don't park there anymore. People even actually the church has AA meetings in the morning and noon and in the afternoon, and people who go to the AA meetings won't even park on the street anymore. So I'm wondering what efforts are going to be taken to, or is this a city policy that you're going to allow Buell Street to be sacrificed to become a homeless encampment?
Yeah, that's a terrific question and a hard question, and a lot of pieces there. So we have been taking actions there. We had a large drug operation there. We had just today, we had a couple of arrests, including an individual who had fled from us in a vehicle earlier in the month, and we apprehended him there. Another person that we apprehended on an arrest on warrant. We're moving through that group regularly and doing what we can with regard to addressing criminal behaviors observed or knowledge of past criminal behavior that has resulted in warrants or violations of conditions of release, and taking those folks. In order to take action against, say, tents or property that is on the grounds of either the Methodist Church or the First Church. Sure.
Both churches have actually started to trespass people.
Yes.
And they have now limited themselves to the sidewalks and the green belts of the city, because they know that churches can no longer keep them off their, that because it's not their property.
I understood that there were actually tents again on the church property today. No, they are only on the green belt. Okay. So that is we do have a notice procedure. That's something that we work on with the Department of Public Works, who controls those areas. And that is something that we're going to have to do, as well as dealing with the criminal behavior that we've observed. The 2 big issues for us right now are, there is no city policy that says that we have ceded this territory. There is no city. We have a long established agreement with the ACLU, frankly, that predates the Supreme Court decision, and was predicated a lot on where people thought the court was going with regard to homelessness in urban areas. And the recent court decision actually went in the other direction. So frankly, I think that the ACLU agreement could stand to be looked at again by the city, but we do operate under it currently, and that has a noticing process. I can't tell you right now whether or not our community support liaisons or CSLs have been noticing in that area, but I know they have been interacting with people in those areas. So I will look to tell you whether or not we are actively noticing the tents. A mattress on the ground isn't an encampment and can't be noticed. I think the tents are relatively recent insofar as popping up. Prior to that, it had been the last 2 days or 2 weeks. 2 weeks is too long and should have been addressed. And hopefully I will check with our community support liaison team and see that it has. But the stuff that I had seen previously and that was there, for example, when we did our larger drug operation, it was not tents. It was mattresses. It was things like that. Those are more challenging to move. People have a right to sit in places as long as they are not obstructing traffic. Now, the issue becomes that the obstruction is in the reasonable concerns of the people who otherwise would transit through that area, whether that means walking on the sidewalks or whether that means parking on the street or even driving up the street, because I know people avoid driving up Buell if they have places to go. But unfortunately, the law states that unless a person physically obstructs and does so in a way that a person cannot reasonably move around it, that is not disorderly, only then is disorderly conduct being committed. If the person physically obstructs in a way that a person can't move around. Now, we, for example, had some luck with a woman who put up a lot of stuff on College Street and then moved briefly to St. Paul Street in the vicinity of City Hall Park last year when our problem was in City Hall Park. City Hall Park has been largely absent of problems this year. They moved first to the library and then it moved to the Marketplace Garage and now it's on Buell because we have shuffled it and we keep kind of addressing it where it sits and it moves. But with regard to the woman on St. Paul and College and City Hall Park, when she set up in a parking metered area that was handicap accessible, we actually got a little bit of acceptance from the court that was disorderly, that really did impede somebody. But merely being up against the wall and taking up half the sidewalk, but not the entirety, was not impeding.
If I could just follow
Or
up, one of
the
biggest
lady said,
things-
I don't understand that for the sake of the camera,
The
but
concern, it happened last winter, there was an encampment.
Yeah.
And in a few weeks
On
from
Buell?
now, on Buell, and it became a very big issue with the female students who live in the neighborhood. It's very dangerous there. And in a few weeks from now, we are going to have the students coming back.
Yes.
And I would hope that that the city would address it before then, because I mean, I know you know this, but if anybody actually does listen to this from the city council and the mayor, the problem we're going to have here is that slowly people are not coming downtown anymore. They're not coming to the restaurants. They're not coming to the stores. The tax base that supports the city and its social programs are paid for by those rooms and meals tax, those sales and use tax, and eventually, you know, there are a lot of empty stores on Church Street right now. There's a number of tax appeals that are going on, and within a short period of time, you know, property values are going down, and the result of that will be that, you know, the city council and the current mayor want to improve social programs, but they can't do that if the tax base is going to get eroded, and it's going to get eroded if they don't take a handle on this. I mean, I know it's not within your purview, but you do talk to the city council and the mayor. I think as someone who walks the town every morning, I do a 3-mile walk every morning, so I really know all the streets. I think it would be better for the city to designate Battery Park as a permitted camping area. It's next to the police station where you could monitor it. It has, they could have toilet facilities there. There is the bandstand that could become useful for providing services. And, you know, we're chasing them around town, and you've chased them, you know, from the library and from City Hall Park, from the parking garage, now under Buell Street. It would make more sense to put them in a place that is not affecting the neighborhoods, but being able to be under the watchful eye of the police.
Well, I appreciate that thought, sir. I do have a meeting with the chief of staff tomorrow about this topic, and I will certainly share what you've said. Ma'am, you had something that you had. A concern, and you don't understand what used to be considered what? Oh, great. The mic is with you.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay.
It's not about it's not amplification. It's for the
So,
camera.
so the thing is, what I understand is that used to be considered illegal for people to be, you were talking about the woman who was leaning up against, or whatever you were, you know, referencing. It used to be considered loitering. So I don't understand how we got away from that and how we're not really trying to, I mean, Burlington has become a playground for for addiction and for the homeless. And so they need oversight, they need guidance. So we just have left them at their own devices.
So there is not a loitering statute in Vermont law.
Why?
But there are disorderly conduct statutes that are about fighting or the interruption of a permitted event. They actually the disturbance of a permitted event, or about impeding pedestrian or vehicle traffic. And then there are other parts of disorderly conduct that don't fly anymore because we as a society and as a culture have changed. It used to be prohibited to use obscene or offensive language in public, and a police officer could cite a person for that or ticket a person for that. And that's simply not something that we do anymore, right? Our standards on it have changed dramatically. They've changed with regard to what we accept on television, or what we accept out of the mouths of our youths, or what we expect in the public sphere. And that incorporates with a First Amendment right to express. And therefore, we see that kind of change. We've seen the same kinds of changes for different reasons, not for First Amendment reasons per se, but with regard to civil liberties around what people can and cannot do. For example, there used to be an ordinance and a statute against what we would call aggressive panhandling in some places. And that was an approach by somebody to demand money in an aggressive way. That is considered a First Amendment protected activity now. I have the right as an individual to ask you for money anytime I want. What I don't have a right to do is threaten you explicitly. However, the law does not really distinguish the fact that for many people, merely being approached in that kind of way does feel threatening, and it does feel problematic. But the law in the United States does not think of victims. It thinks about the rights of the accused. And,
Right.
and that's how we work.
We see that's not working.
But
So, I
in
mean,
other words, I work at the Shelburne Museum, and I have a lot of people who use the bus to get to work.
Yes.
So when they're talking to each other on the bus, they're talking about North Street, in an older man, 65 years old, going to the bus stop, being accosted by some sort of a gang, demanding $10 to be able to get to the bus stop. I mean,
that's absolutely awful. And if that were reported, that is something that we would try to do something about.
Do you have any idea what that crew is doing out there?
I know that there, I had not heard about this particular phenomena. I do know of past patterns of robbery that have existed. Most of those young men are not doing that. And I mean, past as in several years ago. As far as right now and that kind of activity, no. We had a spate of robberies on the marketplace late at night. They were not of people trying to get to the buses. They were largely of bar goers.
Extortion or?
Well, yes. What you're describing could be considered, that could meet the robbery statute. The threat, it depends too on how explicit the threat is. And unfortunately, the law really does want that threat to be pretty clearly stated. Give me $10 to get on the bus or I will punch you.
Yeah.
That is an attempted assault and robbery.
Okay.
But hey man, I need $10. As I stand belligerently in your way before you get on the bus, that is a harder
The way
piece
it was
to prove.
explained to me, they were saying, if you don't give me the $10, you're not going to make it to the bus stop.
And that becomes more explicit. I do believe that there is something there that would allow, if it were reported and looked at, that we could make a case on that.
On North Street.
Certainly a citation. What happens at the next stages is different.
all right, so we're talking about all the rights of these people that are offending. What about the rights of those of us that are taxpayers? My taxes went from $6,000 to $10,000 this year, all right? And I don't feel safe. So it doesn't make sense to me that we're not being protected as taxpayers. And we're talking about all the rights of everybody else who's homeless and addiction, and there's no oversight, there's no guidance, there's no, okay, we can offer you this if you're willing to do that. You know what I mean? Why is there such freedom for people who don't care about anything? I have a tenant in my home who just moved in yesterday. He had something coming to the door. It came to the door at 2 o'clock, and between 2 and 2:30, it was stolen. And I'm on a main street. There's traffic, there's people all over the place. What about my rights? So I don't feel safe at all.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that, ma'am. It upsets me to hear that. It does not make me feel good to hear that. And it doesn't make the men and women inside the Burlington Police Department feel good to know this either. But I'm not looking for sympathy because I'm trying to express sympathy. I understand where you are, and I understand how challenging this is. What you are asking for, however, is far outside my purview or that of the police department. It is a realignment of what our community wants. And our community has said many times as a whole that it wants different things. And what you are expressing is something that is shared by many, but it's often shared silently. And it has not been the dominant voice that is heard by the folks who make the decisions for our community. Ma'am. No, sir, I'm sorry. I'd be happy to talk to you, but there was a lady behind you.
I wonder if you would please address the trespassing ordinance.
Yeah.
I live over at Mackenzie House.
Yeah.
And thankfully this year, things have been a lot better than last year, but last year was hell for us over
Yeah.
there. And we'd have people hanging around doing drugs right near our building. And you have me on record at the police station. I've called several times, but on the trespassing issue. One night I called, there were 3 guys down there. It was early evening. People were walking their dogs from our building, older people getting to their cars. And so I called and I spoke with the dispatcher and I said, explain. He said, "Are you the manager?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you the property owner?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, there's nothing we can do." And I said, "Could you please send somebody, just drive through and just kind of coax them on?" "No, we can't do that." And they talked about a warrant. Now, my understanding from what I've heard from other people and from this officer was I would have to go down there and find out who this person is and write them up and hand them a warrant. I don't feel as a citizen, it's safe for me, but also my responsibility to serve somebody a warrant. I would think that would be a police department issue. So, yeah, could you please?
So it's not a warrant. It is a notice of trespass. And I say that not to be, pedantic, but simply to make it clear that that's the term. A warrant is something issued by the court that basically allows for a temporary reduction in somebody's Fourth Amendment protections, whether that is to arrest an individual or whether that is to take over to go into that person's property or take his or her effects. And so the notice of trespass is something that the city of Burlington for the past, I think about 7 years has required that it be issued by the property owner. Now, unfortunately, in a rental space, renters are not property owners. And there are reasons for this that do not fit with what you're describing, but they are reasons. If, for example, the apartment down the hall from you is occupied by a couple with a teenage son, and they are out, and their teenage son invites people over, and those people are less than great neighbors for that night, your ability to trespass, that you can't trespass them. They are visiting him. You've never seen them before. They're loitering in the halls, although we don't use, as I said, the term loitering in a legal sense, but they're hanging out in the halls. All of these things are against the rules of your building. They're certainly upsetting you, but you can't determine whether those people are legitimately in that building or not. And unfortunately, the same is true even when we get past and into areas where there's more common sense that says that person doesn't belong in our building. When the person with 18 shopping bags worth of detritus and a disheveled appearance and an odoriferous mien comes up to that floor and walks the hall, we all can common sense say that person does not belong in this building. But unless you know for sure and have control of the building, the law doesn't allow you to be able to remove them. The law used to allow the police to remove them absent instruction from a property owner. The city of Burlington said that we can't. And some of that has to do with the concerns about bias on the part of police officers. Frankly, a lot of the changes in law, as much as I said that some of those changes come from culture and from the idea that, my example with profanity, that we all, for example, just swear a little more than we used to back in the days of Andy Griffith, although that's a component of changing law, so is, problems that we see. Police in the past have done things that were not entirely lawful, that might have been called extra legal illegal. And frankly, some of them were effective and successful, but they were not lawful. And if they ran up against what the law prescribes or what the Constitution allows, then they needed to be stopped. And so the idea of being able to trespass anyone you want because you don't like the way they're looking or what they're doing is a challenging one for law enforcement to have that authority. It does make more sense to give it to the property owner. And the property owner can say, I don't want this person here. And as long as the property owner does not say that because of that person's membership in a protected class, doesn't say it because the person is French and they don't like people from the country of France, that would be a protected class, nationality. Doesn't say it because the person is a man or a woman, your sex is a protected class. As long as that is not a component, a property owner can trespass anyone that property owner wants for any reason and doesn't have to articulate the reason, just says off you go. But police need to be more careful than that. And the city of Burlington has chosen not to allow officers to do that. There is a move afoot to try to return some of those authorities. We've also worked out MOUs in a very small number of cases. In fact, I only know of one at Decker Towers with BHA in order to say, we temporarily can do this in this building. In other words, if I walk in and there you are in the corners, I'm going to ask, are you supposed to live here? You don't give me any real indication that you do or proof that you do, out you go. And if it's the second time, and if I issued you paper, that notice of trespass we talked about the first time, then I can arrest you the second time. But that was a very specific set of circumstances that only happened very recently. For the past several years prior to that, it has been the policy of the city and the Burlington Police Department not to undertake that. And I know that that is frustrating. I don't like how it was described to you. There's nothing we can do. I don't like that description, but it is true that you yourself could not issue those people trespasses. Now, part of the issue too is where were they? Were they on the porch? Were they on the street? On the street, frankly, there is nothing that can be done.
The sidewalk, it's a private road through there, right across from
The drive between the Elmwood pods and your property.
Sidewalk on our property.
So that you can ask somebody to move. Sorry?
So
There's signage. Great. So that's one piece you need: signage and or fencing and or communication from the property owner or his or her lawful agent. And so, property owners could make every single tenant a lawful agent, and they won't. And the reason they won't is because there's always the possibility that tenant in 4B does not like the tenant in 4C and constantly trespasses anybody who visits. And then next thing you know, you've got false arrests and you got, I mean, these are the things that we run into, but none of them run up against the common sense that I talk about. And the problem is the law sometimes doesn't exhibit common sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I had a follow-up on what the powers of the police are with regard to trespass. And you talked about an MOU that the department has with Decker Towers. Could a similar MOU be set up with, say, like the Methodist Church on Beale Street or that borders Beale Street? I spent a half an hour on the phone with them today. They are in crisis and they're under siege. They have signage that says no trespassing. Last night, I actually parked there and I watched someone had a cooking fire on the steps of the church. And in my conversation today with one of the employees there, they said that they've had $25,000 worth of expenses to their steps, and they've had to make insurance claims. They're at the risk of losing their insurance. They've lost their copper downspouts on the church and have to replace those. And they also have quotes out for fencing to fence the Orchard Terrace side of the building because of the drug dealing and drug use that's going on there. And so I feel like it's an extenuating circumstance there. They're a small parish. I think they have 65 in their congregation. They do not have a lot of resources. And it would be nice if we could find a way to help an institution like that in the city by saying that they said, we don't want anybody on our property between the hours of X and Y, and a cruiser is on patrol there. Couldn't we use that? That wouldn't be prejudicial or showing any bias.
The way the law currently exists, if Officer Jones is driving on Buell and sees, Paul Doe on the grounds of the Methodist Church and knows that Paul Doe has a trespass notice from the Methodist Church and calls dispatch and confirms, and dispatch says, yes, indeed, Paul Doe has a trespass notice. It's right here in our system. Officer Jones can arrest Mr. Doe. And that is entirely lawful. Being more proactive about it, doing it with individuals who are not known to already have a trespass notice, but are on the grounds, that is something we can explore. I will bring it up to the chief of staff when I speak with her tomorrow. I do think there is, I think that there's some merit in that. My mom was born in Venezuela, but grew up in Puerto Rico. And when she was a girl, Puerto Rico was very different than it became by the time I was old enough to visit as a young boy with her. When I visited, I recall that the biggest difference between PR and Burlington, where I grew up in Underhill, but visited Burlington all the time because my parents taught at the university, was that every single window in Puerto Rico has bars on it, and they're gorgeous. They do a lot of great wrought iron work, and they make them filigree and bent and twisted and beautiful, but they're on every single window. And similarly, every single area that it belongs to someone, as minimal as the front yard that's just mostly driveway, has concrete and iron wrought fencing around it. That is what happened to Puerto Rico in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. I don't think anybody wants that for Burlington. We don't want, the fencing that's currently around Immaculate Conception is not what we want. The fencing, if the idea of fencing the entirety of the properties on the corners of Buell and South Winooski, that is not what we want. So I will definitely bring your suggestion up with the chief of staff.
I appreciate that. And I do think that there's a lot of new faces. So the exercise of trespassing every new face that shows up so that individual has a trespass notice seems impractical to me. So if we could have a blanket saying that if a property owner says, we do not want anybody on our property, if you see people on our property, you can remove them.
Yeah.
That would seem to be helpful.
We could certainly explore that. I do believe that's a component of what the ordinance committee has been talking about. And ultimately that too will be something that we'll have to look into. It wasn't just the city that made the decision. It was also our insurer, and that brings with it other kinds of concerns.
I understand. And I will also bring that up with the ordinance committee.
I guess I'm wondering, I mean, I hear all this and I kind of know what's kind of going on. I'm really wondering about the morale of the police officers.
Yeah. It's a challenge. It's a challenge every day. So as most union organizations are, ours is a seniority based roster. And therefore, if you are the junior person on the roster, you're the one who has to stay late. And we routinely make officers stay late. We've only got 3 officers on the shift right now for the whole city. And that's 3 non-supervisory officers. And then we only have 2 non-supervisory officers on the midnight shift. So for a brief while, from 10:30 until 2:30, approximately, a little bit different, but from 10:30 p.m. till 2:30 a.m., we'll have 5. But that used to be our regular midnight shift. And then we will probably end up, depending on, unless it, I hope it rains. I hope it rains and the night is very rainy and therefore not the kind of night that gets really busy. And then we might stay with just the 2. But in all likelihood, we will make one of those 3 officers stay for the next half of the midnight shift. Another 3 to 4 hours of shift work on top of the 10 that he already did. And then we will ask a day shift officer to come in early. There's a day shift officer who's been coming in rather than at 7:30 every day. He's been coming in at about 4:30 for the past bit. And we are doing this to all of them. My overtime amount is massive. It's a huge amount, and it's not good, but that is the only way that we can address the fact that we have 50% fewer non-supervisory sworn officers on patrol than we did in 2019, and we have more calls for service than we did in 2019. Now, we have done some things to try to address that, right? We have more community service officers than we used to. We had 2 in 2019. I have 5 now. That's something, but it doesn't do a lot. And there's only certain kinds of calls that those community service officers can go to. Our CSLs are amazing. Those community support liaisons I talked about, in-house social workers, but they don't answer calls for service. They are more like detectives, right? So when I look at my call volume, the vast, vast majority of that call volume has to be answered by patrol. And even the cases that eventually become detective cases start out as a patrol case. Somebody gets shot in the street, patrol responds. That's a patrol call that detectives then take over. A burglary, that's a patrol call that the detectives then take over. Our CSLs similarly take over calls after they've already begun for the most part, with a handful of exceptions that are new calls for service, not old calls for service. So I don't count those when I look at the total volume because they didn't exist in 2019. And that includes like encampment visits because they do visit homeless encampments. That includes certain kinds of welfare check follow-ups. So they are helpful and incredibly useful. And I do believe that they help us prevent calls from happening in the future. They don't prevent it in the moment, but by addressing a situation that is metastasizing or has already reached a crisis point that an officer intervened, they then prevent it from becoming something again. And they're great at that and really, really valuable, but they are not addressing the kinds of calls for service that you're talking about, such as what am I going to do about these ne'er-do-wells that are trespassing and frightening me? Ma'am.
Chief Murad, I want to thank you for whatever has changed. In the past, I couldn't tell you the year, maybe it was during COVID, but you know, I'd even waved police officers and they'd look so angry. Now, I don't know, there's some kind of new training that has been going on. Since we're here early in the morning on Sunday, there's things that happen and sometimes police need to come and it's amazing. There's some kind of change that has happened. I don't know what training that's happening, but I know they're working hard, but they're working together. And I see the training. I worked in a mental hospital for 16 years with behaviors, and the people are doing such good work. And they're even waving to the community, which I find very grateful because I feel like we're all in this community together and getting to know the names of people who are unhoused just as much as knowing the names of our police officers. We're in this together. So whatever's changed, I really thank you for that.
Well, I greatly appreciate your saying that. I think that some of it is simply that, I think there were a lot of hurt feelings over the decisions that were made. And I think that some of that is passing. We have a lot of new officers who weren't part of the department at that time. We brought aboard 15 new police officers last year. We've brought aboard 7 so far this year. And so we are trying to bring in, officers, and we're trying our best to try to do that. I have said multiple times that, that essentially forgiveness is the relinquishment of hope for a different outcome or for changing the past. And that's something that we can't really do. And so I'm glad to hear that that's happening. With regard to the mental health part of it that you mentioned, that is a training effort. We've done a lot of training around addressing, how to deal with mental health. We've sent more and more officers to a program called Team 2. And we are also working hard we're trying to identify something called crisis intervention training. But our CSLs do that training and share that training with officers.
That's great. Thank you.
Chris. Or this gentleman too, but.
Yes.
That was about the 20. Is that what you're going to say?
I'll let Charlie go and then I'll go after him.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. If I only had eyes in the back of my head, I'd have seen him. I think you're doing much better. And without naming names, things are looking up. I think you've got a lot of good ideas. I would think you are glad higher ground is not about to arrive when there are 3 to 5 people for the entire city. And just a few things like BHA. BHA, God bless them, administers services and gives subsidies to hundreds of us. And I live in a BHA building. And the owner, I couldn't even tell you what name they have listed as the owner. Probably not the executive director. But a fellow was sleeping in the garden between the sidewalk and the building. A fellow was sleeping a few years ago. This is before COVID. And we had a building manager. And she called the police. And he said, "Do you own the building?" And she said, "No, I'm the building manager." And he said, "I can't do anything with him. I can't even wake him up." And we all thought that was pretty silly. It is. If I had been around that day, I think I would have, well, gone out to water the garden with a quart container of water and accidentally spilled some on his head and then apologized. But, you know, I'm from Brooklyn where you get feisty. There was a fellow on College Street who crashed into me early in April. And he growled in my face, "Get off the fucking sidewalk." So I can understand why people think it's a little odd downtown. But being from Brooklyn, I saved the Vermonters from having hurt feelings and feeling accosted and confronted. I said, "Fuck you, you get off this fucking sidewalk. These are benefits."
So with regard to
Yes.
the trespass piece,
Yes.
that is wrong. If a building manager is asking to trespass somebody, that's the very definition of an authorized person, and the officer should have taken action. Please don't pour water on people. That did not work out for a store owner in San Francisco. It was cruel and it did not work out for him insofar as how he was appreciated by, you know, everyone once it hit social media. But for a police officer, absolutely, they should be accepting a property manager's attestation that this individual is trespassing. So I'm sorry that happened, but if
Thank
it was
you. No,
2019 or 18,
I agree. I'm always glad when I don't do what I fantasize having done.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
much safer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for what you're doing and good luck with building it up. And yeah, the whack-a-mole is a very difficult game to win.
Yeah.
Pop up someplace
you, sir.
else. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm Chris Hazley, I live on College Street, and in addition to being involved with the NPA, I serve on the Church Street Marketplace Commission. And one of the things that I think is kind of a little bit of a bright spot that we learned a few weeks back is that a number of folks that have had issues with like the retail theft and the trespassing that have been released on conditions, there's been a movement to identify those folks. And when someone has been identified as, hey, this person's been trespassed and they're in an area where they're not supposed to be, the calls have been going in, and the Burlington Police Department have been very good about going to take that individual into custody. And State's Attorney George has been good about following up appropriately with those cases. So there is some movement there. And I believe that was what you called the violations of conditions of release. And what was the other little acronym there?
One is violation of conditions of release or VCR, and the other is arrest on warrant or AOW.
So to just follow up on some of the trespassing comments, you know, as a tenant myself, it is entirely frustrating. We've had times where we've caught people actively roaming around the building, stealing packages, and we've called and, you know, as a tenant told we can't do anything about it. Respectfully, that's not a good look for the department. That's not helping you. And I think it would behoove the department to push the city, but say, we need to be able to trespass people. When a tenant calls in a 32-unit building at 11 p.m. at night, it's not likely that the landlord who lives down in Vergennes or Shelburne or wherever is going to get in their car and come. So it needs to be dealt with. And if it's not dealt with, it would not come as a shock or surprise if it gets dealt with by the tenants in a very different manner. And so to follow up on that, the city, as you, I think some of you may know, is looking at its trespass ordinance, which is a civil violation, meaning the people who get trespassed, they get a citation and they pay a fine. Now, several months ago, I had been walking by the City Place construction, and I noticed that there was a sign on the fence. I don't know if it's still there, but it made reference to Title 13, I think it was Section 3705, related to the criminal trespass statute, which is a state law, which provides for up to a $500 fine, and I believe some type of imprisonment. So the question, and as I understand it, several years ago, prior to the commencement of instruction, there were some activists who had gone onto that property and who were actually arrested and prosecuted under the criminal trespass statute. So my question is, why are we not using the criminal trespass statute to deal with some of these issues that we're seeing here in the downtown core and over on Buell Street?
We normally do. We don't generally default to the municipal ordinance code. We generally use the Vermont statute. Certainly police officers do. And the CSOs cannot issue trespass arrests or citations with the VSA, which is the Vermont statutes. They can only do the municipal ordinance, which they do in City Hall Park or in the marketplace, but not with regard to private property. If we find someone trespassing in private property and we have a trespass notice and we have an authorized person or the property owner, him or herself, saying this is a trespass, we use the VSA. I will say, however, that no one goes to prison for trespass. No one, not in the state of Vermont. That does not mean they are not prosecuted. That does not mean that there aren't some sort of consequences. But the idea of the prison time that the statute allows for, which I believe is I believe it may be up to a year. It's certainly a misdemeanor. It is a felony if it's inside an occupied dwelling. That may have, occasionally you will see those have some sort of outcome. Generally, that's because it's a burglary that has been pled down, or there was some other kind of crime that occurred in the location that was pled down to a felony level criminal trespass. But no one who gets a criminal trespass is going to prison for the allotted statutory time. But we do use those. Sorry.
My name is Bernie Carver.
Hi.
I also want to thank you for the excellent work your officers and you do for our community. We've been passing out free food on Sunday mornings for almost a year and 9 months now. And we've had to call the police a few times. And what I've witnessed is very professional behavior and kindness. That's what we try to promote here is kindness and empathy.
Yeah.
And I see that in your officers as well.
Yeah.
And I was curious, how long does a no trespass order last? Are there different levels of it, or are they all the same?
So a no trespass order can last up to a year. That's not actually explicitly stated in statute, but that's sort of what we do. It's also what the state's attorney, and this was before the current state's attorney, this has been a longstanding sort of policy of the Chittenden County State's Attorney's Office that really a year is about as far as you can go. And, you can reissue it if you need to after that. So we have individuals in this city who have had multiple trespasses issued at multiple locations, and they are essentially trespassed from almost every single private establishment in the city. And that is all, something that is renewed almost every year because they violate it again and again, but it's a year. And that's what it says on the notice of trespass that's online. With regard to the kindness part, I knew Roddy Cleary as a child. Her son Neil and I were in Oliver together at Lyric Theater back in 1984, and then I re-met Roddy when I arrested her for protesting at Senator Senator Leahy's office over the F-35s. Her ethos of kindness and how she sort of approached the world, I think that's absolutely one that's worth emulating. And so to the extent that the officers display any bit of that when you see them, when they come here and answer calls, I'm glad to hear that.
All right, we're at time, so we'll give Mr. Murphy the final word since he had his hand up.
Just a follow-up question about the church did have its copper gutters stolen.
Yeah.
My garden shed was broken into and they stole the weed whacker, the blower, the hedge trimmer and all of that. And I guess my question is the police force trying to determine where these are being sold in order to stop the theft? Because the thefts would not happen if there's not a place for them to monetize them.
Sure.
They're not going to steal, my battery operated blower,
right?
Unless they can monetize it. And I'm wondering what efforts are being made to chase down who's buying them.
So currently, not a lot. That is not, we have 10 detectives. That's by contract. The contract demands that I have at least 10 officers assigned to the Detective Bureau, and we've needed them the last couple of years with regard to violent crime. Thankfully, that has not been as pronounced this year. I am trying to get with other police departments in the county a retail theft task force, and a component of that is addressing open air locations where sale is happening of stolen property. We know that was happening at the library, that people were selling things at the library. Facebook Marketplace is an amazing tool for folks, and it's not one that we have the bandwidth to monitor or sort of observe. We do occasionally when we have very specific cases. I have one officer in particular who is really invested in going after bike thieves and going after automobile thieves, and she has done incredible work creating updated lists of what is out there. She does a really great job of funneling things from the Burlington Bike Theft Facebook page, and then sharing that information with officers saying, hey, we're on the lookout for this very distinctive orange Trek. If you see it, it is to be looked at. If that Trek has been, and part of the challenge we have is that people go to the bike theft page but don't register it with us as stolen. If we don't have a serial number, for us to seize an item from somebody is difficult. We have to come up with a lot of other totality of circumstances rationales. Now, a clear picture of a very distinctive bike that has really idiosyncratic or unique markings on it and is under the rear of a known bike thief as he pedals up Battery, we're going to seize that bike, and we're going to give him the opportunity to show that he did in fact purchase it, as he will inevitably claim to us when we try to take it from him, and we'll give the owner an opportunity to come in and demonstrate ownership of it. But it is infinitely easier if we have a report of the theft of that bike with a serial number, because then we just take it. I mean, you flip the bike, it's got the serial number, you're on a stolen bike. What we can't do is arrest that individual for the theft of the bike. The standard right now from the court is that we have to have relatively beyond a reasonable doubt is the court standard. Our standard is probable cause. Known bike thief on a bike that he clearly can't afford that was reported stolen this morning, that's probable cause if you ask me. And that should be an arrest, if not for the theft of the bike, then at minimum for possession of the stolen property. But that's not what the court is currently telling us. And so we generally let that individual go on his merry way, probably to steal bikes again. And every now and then we run into cases where a person of limited means is in fact on a stolen bike that he bought for $15 or $20 from somebody else. And while he should have known better, and while he probably did know better, he is not in possession of stolen property in the sense of intent or knowledge, or what we would call, voluntarily intentful and knowledgeable for the purposes of meeting that statute. And so that's part of the reason why we have to be careful about that too. But recovering the bike at the very least, and the same thing, by the way, is true of vehicles like automobiles. Stolen automobile, the person in that stolen automobile is not automatically arrested for that stolen automobile. But absent a good deal of other very strong proof, like video of him taking it from the Cumbies where the owner had, somewhat foolishly left it running with keys in it, and we see the guy jump in and drive away, he's going to get arrested if we have that. But absent that, we take the vehicle back, but we often can't do anything to the individual. Although I will also say that almost all the time, those individuals have existing conditions of release or warrants for their arrest because they have done many, many other things. So I've taken up a lot of time here.
Chief, it looks like we had one more question here. If you're willing to take one more.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I understand it's been very challenging times for you and your staff and the officers. And defunding the police was a tragedy. It was a big, big mistake. And I just want to thank you for all that you are doing. And I see that, a lot is happening positively. And I look forward to a better future for Burlington. So
I do too. I appreciate that. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for coming out, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. So moving on to the next item of our amended agenda is the discussion about the dissolution of joint operations with Ward 2. Gentleman over there made the amendment to the agenda. So if you would like to speak first.
I just want to make it clear that I certainly support the dissolution of the joint NPA. I'm in, oh, sorry, I got it right here. I'm in Ward 3. But I wanted to make clear that I have no, I have a lot of friends in Ward 2. And I've gone to a lot of NPA meetings. I visit a lot of them online. So I have no contention about there's two sides to the story. It's all one. It's having your own NPA. The major issue for most of my friends, I live right on Church Street across from City Hall, is that people in downtown, particularly in downtown, Ward 3 comprises more than downtown, needless to say. But people from downtown, from south of Main Street down to Maple Street, don't feel inclusive at those meetings. They don't even go anymore. It's not just a distance. It's just feeling that your neighborhood NPA is your neighborhood NPA. So I don't want to offend anyone, particularly anyone that's here as the Central District Counselor from Ward 2. But I brought the motion up. I think it's an important move. I think it's good for the city overall. It certainly, from a selfish point of view, will be good for me for downtown. And anyone else that voted for to amend the agenda has anything that they want to say relative to that are from Ward 3, be good to speak up.
I just feel similarly to what you're saying. I live way at the edge of Ward 3. I mean, we're like Elmwood Avenue. We're just at the end. Yeah, and I just feel like our issues may be, though similar, we'd have some real specific issues like, you know, I hate to keep beating the drum, but the pod community, which was really, you know, an issue for me. I'm not I mean, I know that the whole city is concerned, but that's in my backyard. And I just don't think it got the airtime or the play that I wish it had gotten. And again, I didn't even know about NPA a couple of years ago, so I wasn't involved at that time, and that was unfortunate. But because I am still real interested in what's going on, and as I said before, I'd like to see it change a bit. I really would like to focus on our ward, or I think it's going to get lost in the shuffle, unfortunately.
Thank you. I just want to say no offense taken at all. From a personal standpoint, I was a resident of Ward 3 for almost 25 years, and overnight woke up and suddenly I'm in Ward 2. And I have definitely noticed at the meetings, one of the first meetings we had after the redistricting, people raised their hands. Okay, who's here from Ward 2? Almost the entire room was Ward 2, and we suddenly realized the stark difference, because now all of these people had been moved to Ward 2, not from Ward 3. Now Ward 3 stretches out over. From a personal standpoint, I like the joint meetings, but as a representative of both communities, I'm recognizing that there's a problem, and that we're not, now that we have people that are even further out, we're not doing enough to pull people in. I've actually been trying to find out where the community rooms that are available on that part of town, which is a question, because even some of the people that are out on King Maple might not necessarily come to, say, City Hall for a meeting, right? So points taken all around. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel pretty much the same way, and I would like to get to know and kind of bring in the other part of the ward, because when we gone not to too many meetings, but it has been primarily Ward 2. And I think we have some unique needs and desires, and I would like to have more involvement in our ward. So
Yeah. So.
I'm trying to, and this as well, to figure out Mike. Hi, Mike. I and Chris and Milo to some extent on our own have been trying to figure out how we can get a hold of those people who are down at King and Maple and get them in and bring them in. It is going to be a very, very diverse bunch of people. At least as diverse as we are when it's 2 and 3 together as it has been. I was interested to hear from you where the people are who are not coming up to the.
Well, for me, because I live on the lower block of the marketplace, are people in the King Maple neighborhood, people down the hill on College Street towards the lake, people up right to the border to the east, which is South Winooski, that I know in the library, which is actually not in Ward 3, but those people, it gets, I can't not say downtown because I'm a very big advocate of downtown. Downtown is in Ward 3, but not everybody in Ward 3 is in downtown either. So I just think that finding a good place to meet or possibly meeting in more than one location in some sort of a rotation where different areas would have a chance to feel comfortable meeting in a room. I mean, we don't need anything much bigger than this, would be helpful, but I just think knowing that Ward 3 is trying to take, the Ward 3 NPA is trying to take good care of Ward 3 residents. I'm not saying that the combined 2 and 3 isn't, but I recall with going, I don't want to go back to the issues of the pods or the history of the pods, but when they were being discussed before anything was done, and CEDO Director Pine had to come to meetings, there were several meetings at 2-3, and I think you may have been at one of them. I feel that you had a hard time getting your message across. And it's not that Ward 2 felt a different way about the pods than you did. I mean, you live right next door, basically across the street. But I think it was because meeting up there felt like you were kind of almost out of your ward. I mean, you're a half a block inside your ward. So that's nobody's fault. I mean, it's only, if any fault is, it's just that we're maybe not participating enough. But that's in my memory, because I think if you were if a presentation was made at a Ward 3 NPA, you would have had a stronger voice and you would have had a lot more people listening to you.
I do want to say that if we're looking at where we're going to do this meeting, just understand about parking and walking and like I'm not real, one of the reasons like to go to that 2 and 3, I'm not going to walk there after dark and walk home, and ain't no way. So I've been doing online. And the other thing, this is just a crazy thing, but the acoustics there are horrible. I can't hear. I cannot hear. So I can hear at home when I have my headset on. So just keep, it's weird little things to keep in mind, you know, when you're looking for a place.
I was just going to say, yes, it's a brick room. And well, I don't know if anybody was in the gym, but the bricks alone, I've been playing music in all kinds of places, and bricks are not what you want. You want that, you need baffling if you got bricks. You get, yeah, the sound there is bad.
No, we're good. Thank you. Thank you for the meeting. Appreciate it.
Not that I could think of. Just, yeah, I agree that we do need to keep in mind the walking and the parking and the acoustics definitely makes sense. Lighting, as Charlie and I were just chit-chatting a little bit earlier, and I made a note of that. But agreed, like we do need to keep in mind, that we need to be accessible for all of the Ward 3 members and how that's going to best fit for everybody.
Yes, we've heard from everybody, so I guess I'll say my piece. You know, this is my second tour duty on the NPAs, and I do understand some of the frustrations that folks have voiced. So for me, when you go back to the founding documents and the resolutions that have been passed over time by the city council, it was very clear to me that the intention behind the NPAs was to give each individual ward their own voice. Now, I'm not sure of the how and why wards 2 and 3, and by extension wards 4 and 7 ended up coming together. But with the recent changes to the ward map brought on by redistricting, the wards have changed quite a bit. And I've heard from a number of folks, very much like what this gentleman has said, that folks downtown are like, they don't feel like their voice is being heard. And that's to say nothing of the people who are living down in the King Maple neighborhood. And so to make folks literally have to truck all the way up to the northernmost portion of the ward is a challenge. And what we have found is that because of the way this has been marketed for several decades at this point, at least the 25 years I've been here, it's the wards 2 and 3 NPA and the Old North End community dinner. So when I've been out canvassing the neighborhoods in downtown and King Maple and some of the other areas south of Pearl Street, a lot of people are like, wait, I'm part of Ward 3. I thought that it was like the Old North End community dinner. So there's this impression that it's an Old North End thing. And on top of that, because of the marketing, there's an impression that it is one NPA representing 2 wards. And so the problem there is when, unlike some of the wards that have their own NPA, that have a full 2-hour meeting from 6:30 to 8:30, we've got 2 wards worth of business that we have to try to cram into 2 hours. And more often than not, we're responding to requests from various city departments. And by the time we get done with that, we have no time to talk about the things that ordinary people want to talk about, which was kind of why and how this meeting came to be, because there was a lot of people that wanted to get an update regarding the public safety issues in downtown, and we just simply didn't have time for it. And then the other reason, quite simply, is we need to make changes to our bylaws. And this is the first time we've had the requisite number of people together in the room to actually have the numbers to do that. And so from my perspective, I don't think anyone is averse to, cooperating with it, but I don't think that we should be mandated to have to do business with another ward. I think that Ward 3 deserves to have its own independent voice, so that we can be representative. And my experience has been, and the pod discussion is a great example, is it really, the barrier of participation are so low. It's whoever shows up. And so what happens is we get more participation from Ward 2 in the Old North End, and it's whoever shows up gets to vote. And when everyone votes together, we end up getting drowned out. We have no voice. So I think it's important that every ward gets their own voice in the process. So I'm going to be inclined to support this. So anyone else has any final parting comments they want to make?
Are you planning on, are we going to have a vote now?
Well, it was warned to make a motion to discussion and vote. So if you want to make that motion.
I'll be happy to make that motion. If people here want to vote yay or nay, let's have a vote so people can express yay or nay or abstaining.
So am I
think we
hearing a
still have
motion to
enough people here?
Motion to dissolve the joint operations of the wards 2 and 3 NPAs? Is that what I'm hearing? Am I seeing a second for that? All right, several seconds and thirds. Any final comment? Looked like Councilor Grant, you might have something you wanted to say.
I do. I would be concerned about taking a vote now, because I'm not sure how many people were aware of this meeting tonight. I know that I kind of caught it late, and I arrived late because there was something else over regarding the Manhattan Drive dump road issue.
Oh.
I feel like more people need to know. I think people would be receptive, but I wouldn't want it for some people to feel like it came out of nowhere. It's certainly something, especially after the redistricting has been talked about, because we've noticed how it changed. I mean, when we did that, we had like, what, 4 people raise their hand out of all these people that were in the room. So clearly it really affected who was in 3, but I think there should be a vote. I'm just not sure this is the meeting. I think you'd want to really warn it and advertise it and say,
Well, we did warn the meeting in accordance with as a special meeting. We actually did more than what we needed to do. We actually took out Facebook ad. We actually put an ad in the 7 days to warn this. We put it on front porch forums. We did canvassing in the neighborhood, and still we got a very minimal turnout. So I'm going to call the question here on this one. And so I guess all in favor of dissolving the joint operations of the 2 wards, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We might want to ask them what they think, but we're all for it.
Well, then motion passes and we are now dissolved, I guess. So we'll move into the bylaws discussion at this point, and I guess we'll need to have a discussion about when we would like to meet. So, Amy?
Hi, I think we have to do something to talk to the other people who did not show up at this, who will show up at the next meeting for when they think there's going to be a Ward 2 and 3 meeting up at the Old North End Community Center. Something has to be done to talk to those people as well, and I share Milo's concern about that.
I think we'll be notifying them of the decision that was made tonight, and it's the planning meeting for that is still a couple weeks out. The next meeting's not till September 12th. That's, I think, 6 weeks away. So I think that's more than enough time to get the word out and let people know. And I think our chore and task will be to try to bring out more people. This is a start, but honestly, for the past 6 months, we've been, we'll get people show up at the meeting for the community dinner, and then the dinner's over and they leave. And we're lucky if we have 4 or 5 people from Ward 3 there. So it's, this has been the biggest turnout we had. And I think a lot of it's driven by the location. And I think to have this many people come out in person on such a rainy night, I really says a lot about what people want to have happen here. So I'll follow up on that. Milo, you have a question or a comment, so I'll give you the floor.
just a comment. It would be great to have like a brief meeting to troubleshoot possible locations. If and I will endeavor to continue to follow up on the community rooms that are in the King Maple area, and how many people they can hold, and if they hold a kitchen, if we want. I think it's great to continue to have food. I think people appreciate that, especially for those of us who come right after work. So just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. And I'll just simply say, speaking as an individual steering committee member, I'd like to see a more central location. I think that the Busher Room would be excellent for that. Whether we can get the Busher Room is a different matter. So we may need to enlist the help of our counselors to do that. The library is another option. But I think we'd probably try to find something that's a city space or space that's not going to require us to pay a small fee for use of the facilities. So on that note, we'll roll into the bylaws discussion. Zach, can you pull up the bylaws document and we'll walk through that there? So as I mentioned, we've had to make some changes to the bylaws for a while, and we've been kicking the can down the road just because we haven't had enough people at the meeting to actually have the conversation and discussion. So the bylaws proposed changes we'll be looking at tonight. There's basically, I think, 3 of them. One of them has to do with the updating of the description of our ward. Obviously, the ward boundaries have changed. There are some words in the bylaws that describe the ward boundaries, so that's updated to reflect the new map, which we have right here in front of the computer. So that's the first one. I think that's pretty straightforward, and the handouts are there if you want to read the actual language on that. The changes are in red. The second change had to do with membership. Right now, our bylaws allow persons 14 or older to have voting membership in the NPA. I think that there was a thought that we want to make that more consistent with state law. And since state law allows individuals who are 17 years of age or older to vote in the primary if they will be 18 by the general, I think that was a thought that it would be consistent there. So that's the second change. third change has to do with quorum here. We have struggled to get it, and we just barely had enough people tonight. So we are proposing that some changes there to the quorum so that we can actually get business as we work to bring more people into the process. Now, I've actually gone through various mailing lists that I have had from different meetings and organizations, and I've got a list of about 40 people that are in Ward 3 that I'll be reaching out to that I think may be open to coming. So hopefully outreach will be helpful there. And then the last change is regarding our funding. The city has recently clarified how the funding from the city is supposed to be used. Previously, it had been used a lot to support various community organizations to do different community outreach types event. But the city has clarified that the monies actually have to be used to directly support the NPA's goals of promoting interaction with city and getting public participation, and specifically states that it cannot be used to benefit an individual or family or group. So we're updating the language there to reflect the nature of how the funds should be used. And that language was pulled almost verbatim from the original 1982 resolution that created the NPA. And then it stands to reason that if we're going to dissolve, then we should probably remove the Article 5, joint operations. That was not part of the proposal, so I will entertain a motion from the floor if someone wants to make that. To remove Article 5, which is well, we just voted to end joint operations, so the next step would be to take it out of the bylaws. So you'll make a okay. So you want to move to remove that? Is that what I'm hearing? Is there a second? Okay. So those are the changes. We have two approaches. We can vote to do the changes in mass, or we can vote on them individually. I'd just like to know, anybody have an objection to doing it as a slate, or would you prefer to do it individually, one at a time? What are folks thinking? Want do it together? Any questions about?
Yeah, I was just going to ask earlier whether we were going to vote bylaw by bylaw or altogether. I don't see anything in here that's particularly unusual or earth-shattering. The changes underpin, in my opinion, what an NPA is meant to do, and in this case is open and, for the people. So I'm just saying that because I think it's worthwhile just to combine everything in one change and vote for the entire package as one.
Not seeing any real interest in splitting it up. We will keep it as a slate. So call motion to adopt the changes for the agenda. Someone want to? Bob?
Do you want me to?
I'm looking for a motion, move to adopt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I put forth a motion to take this to a vote in its entirety.
Okay. Second, Sharon. All right. Any further discussion on bylaw changes? All right. Going once. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Okay. Moving on to the next item of the agenda is our steering committee elections. Our term of office begins on September 1st, ends on August 31st. In years past, we haven't had elections until after the terms have started, so we're going to get a jump start on that tonight. I know that the four of us that are on the steering committee now would like to return. Our bylaws require that we have a minimum of 3 steering committee members up to a maximum of 6. So I'm going to move to nominate, I guess, Michelle Borbis, Chris Hazley, Charlie Messing, Amy Prenowitz, and serve on the steering committee. Is there anybody else here tonight that would like to serve? I do have one individual who had spoken to me that ended up getting called into work tonight that was not able to attend. His name is Gerald Fields. He's actually a caretaker here at the church. He actually lives down in the King Maple neighborhood, which is an area that we've really struggled to get. And he also brings an element to diversity here as he is a man of color. So I think that that's another important perspective. So I'd like to nominate Daryl Fields if someone would be kind enough to second that. Any final nominations here? So we have a slate of 5 people. Amy?
Also, we should also connect with the other people who are going to end up at the other meeting in September. I don't think, it doesn't feel quite right to me to be doing it with one set of people when there's another set of people that we know about. I'm glad we've got this bunch. This is important. I don't want to make them unimportant.
I'm not really following what you're saying here.
Thinking about it, or they saw it and they got that knows about it. And they will be going to the meeting in September and may very well be upset if they feel something happened that they didn't.
I understand that concern. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, we warned it, we did all the steps, and we actually went above and beyond what we normally do by putting an ad in the 7 days and on Facebook. So I can't control, who shows up to the meetings, but it's been a struggle all the way around. So, Councilor Grant.
I think we would be at the point now where we take the steps to get the word out. And that now that we've made that decision, that's really, we just have to be organized about getting the word out. I think it'd be good to flyer to the King Maple area, and we can talk about that at a different time, but that's really where we are right now. We have to get the word out to let people know
been
the changes that have
moved
occurred.
and seconded to do the voting tonight. It was warned tonight. And again,
Yep, I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying we're now
it
at
is
that
what
point.
it is. It's
Yeah.
like,
all I'm saying is that
and
we
it
we
does
just have to-
sound like, we are going to have some vacancies on the steering committee. So if there are folks who want to come forward later to be involved, they will have that opportunity, to your point. So,
So Councilor Grant, I couldn't hear you that well, but because I was going to bring it up, you're talking about doing some recruitment in King Maple?
Both.
Putting out the word.
Putting out the word in general of the changes that we've made for people who missed it, just to minimize as much as possible the surprise. And I know it's not going to be perfect. I'm not naive about that. And then being intentional about recruiting from these areas that haven't traditionally participated. So like doing a campaign, like I had a door knock for my campaign. We could come up with flyers and then do a door knocking campaign and just say, hey, we want you to be part of this, and give them places they can communicate with. And, after we figure out a location.
Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'll take the lead on communicating out to our colleagues in Ward 2 to let them know, and to get something out on Front Porch Forum and the usual channels.
Yeah, I think
and also
getting the word out applies to all areas, but I was thinking King Maple, I think some of the friends I have down there and some people that I know are just waiting for the door to be opened a little bit. So it will be good to do some recruiting down there. And I'm thinking even in terms of someone on the steering committee from King Maple would help bring the whole south end, not the south end, but the south end of Ward 3 in.
I think that would make sense. And another idea that had been floated is we could do some like smaller, more targeted meetings strictly via Zoom, and try to target some of the other neighborhoods and some more like bigger congregate housing projects where we could, either do a Zoom meeting or maybe like meet like we had done at Mackenzie House back in, I think, March. So unless there's further comments, I'm going to.
Just one thing, Chris,
Sure.
is kind of what Amy was saying. Is somebody going to go to the next Ward 2 and 3 joint meeting and say, hi, guys, this is what we've done? Is anybody going to do that or not?
I'll get the notification out via email and start to spread the word to let folks know, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Want to make sure that people are going to be there.
All right.
Just in case somebody might have questions or something,
All right.
Okay.
So all in favor of what? Yeah, all in favor of adopting the slate of steering committee members? Is that of steering committee members? Say aye, I guess. Aye. Okay.
Did we second?
Yeah, there was a second. I think Gail made the motion and then Trudy seconded. So, all right. So we've got,
Wait, I'm sorry, did we vote on the slate for the?
that's what we were just trying to do.
Oh,
So it's a,
I'm sorry.
all right. So it's been, but backtrack. Yeah. Backtrack. Yeah. We don't really get into the weeds of the parliamentary procedure in the NPA. So we're kind of, but so as they do in the council, it has been moved and seconded to adopt the slate of potential steering committees consisting of Michelle Borbis, Chris Hazley, Charlie Messing, Amy Prenowitz, and Daryl Fields. Any objections? All right, we are good. Next up is adjournment. We are about 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Anybody have any questions or announcements that they would like to make? No, but I'll say on a positive note, this weekend is Festival of Fools, and it is event on the marketplace. It's not a reference to the building at 149 Church. Sorry. Somebody said that the other day. So yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun. And thank you all for coming out tonight. We'll follow up accordingly with the email list and figure out what our next steps are going to be from here. So motion to adjourn. Someone on
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.